I think your analysis was very straight-lined. History doesn't run in a straight line.
Kid, you cannot tell your neighbor he is stealing ducks when you are stealing frogs.
As High Commissioner, I was wrong. As Charandas Prasad, I reacted naturally how any person would have.
I did not come here for that kind of abuse. I did not come here for that kind of abuse. If you're going to go along that road, I'll walk off.
But it's all okay once they're talking. If they weren't talking, I could not have been here today.
You got ADHD.
I got that.
Calm down.
I think I've done enough in terms of taking our team out of trouble from losing.
Come on, Lou Taylor. That's good. I'm reading the script now, and the first person that comes to my mind to play a detective,
Yes,
but an erratic detective, is Mickey Rodriguez.
Why an African slap an Indian? Why a man and slap a woman? No, you deal with that. You deal with that.
We must encourage platforms like this because it brings together different people and allows for discussions to take place in our country on a multiplicity of fundamental issues.
You apologizing for something you think I did is wrong. I don't want you to do that, and you should not have done that. Hi there. Good night from Guyana. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. You are looking at the Freddie Kissoon Show with co-host Leonard Craig. Once again, thanks for being with us. Our guest appeared exactly 1 year before, and he's here this evening to talk about political economy, constitutional change, what the discovery of oil can do or undo for a country. Our guest this evening is Dr. Desmond Thomas, former advisor to the government of Guyana under President Forbes Burnham, the lead economist in the Department of the Caribbean at the Inter-American Bank. He worked there for a number of years, the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, D.C. He is currently a lecturer, senior lecturer at the University of Guyana, and he recently founded a civil society group called Election Reform Group. Not to mention that Dr. Thomas is the author of a recent book. I will just show you the book as I did the last year. Here it is, Electoral System Reform for a Diverse Nation. Please contact me or contact Leonard Craig for a copy. We will contact Dr. Thomas. Electoral System Reform for a Diverse Nation, the case of Guyana. This evening I may take a back seat because co-host Leonard Craig and Dr. Thomas have a lot in common. They are both economists. Leonard Craig did a first degree at UG in economics, a second degree in economics from the Berlin School of Economics, and completed a third degree doctorate at the Harbin Institute of Technology in China in international trade/economics. So let's start the ball rolling by welcoming Dr. Thomas once more. Dr. Thomas, I don't know if you know this young man.
Yes, we know each other now.
So, Dr. Thomas, when we were arranging this interview, you said you want to, part of the discussion you want to expatiate on is the Dutch disease. You want to tell my co-host and your fellow economists, what is your concern about the Dutch disease?
Okay, well, first of all, thanks for inviting me.
For the second time.
For the second time. Yeah, I thought I would talk a little bit about Dutch disease. We wanted to narrow down a couple of subjects. So,
sure.
But essentially, of course.
Talk about anything.
Yeah. Essentially, my big focus these days is electoral system reform. because I think it's vitally important. Guyana needs a lot of institutional strengthening. And, as I've said before, the place to start is with electoral system reform, constitutional reform. But I wanted to say something, start a conversation talking a little bit about the issue of Dutch disease, which brings into consideration where we are right now as an economy, where we are in an oil producing country, a country where we have this one sector that is dominating the economy. But I'll say this, it's all connected to the need for electoral reform. And that's something I'm going to try to show. Now, of course, what is Dutch disease? And essentially, it's the idea that when you have a sector, usually a resource-related sector that dominates the economy, it creates certain distortions, if you wish, where, among other things, you may have increases in the real effective exchange rate. There are a number of factors, but the basic argument is that as a result of that dominant sector growing faster than the rest of the economy, the rest of the economy suffers. The other sectors and so the economy becomes less diversified. It becomes more and more dependent on this one sector. The other sectors lose.
Caribbean economists in the 70s would call that monoculture.
Well, you have different ideas. I think monoculture is just the idea of one sector. I don't think it's the same thing as having the Dutch disease, because, of course, there was a time when all our economies were dominated by sugar, right? But it didn't have the level of dominance that we're talking about here. And sugar is agricultural. Usually, this is associated with mineral wealth. So anyway, I think a useful thing for Guyana is that from the time we had the oil discovery and we got involved in oil, people started to ring alarm bells about Dutch disease. And I think that was a good thing. All right, you started reading articles and so on. And of course, there were these suggestions about setting up a sovereign wealth fund and so on and so on. So the question is, where are we now? Have we really learned anything? Have we benefited? And I am concerned that even with all the forethought and foresight, we are heading into a process of Dutch disease.
This is a serious pronouncement.
I think so, because now look, usually when we hear about the growth performance of the country in the last few years, there is always a mention that, for example, the GDP grew by maybe 60% or 30%, some really astronomical amount. And at the same time, there's mention that the non-oil GDP also grew by maybe 10%, by a very respectable amount. And that, in a way, is maybe intended to suggest that the diversification is happening, but it's not. I don't think it is. And if you see, for example, the sugar industry is in a crisis of unprecedented nature. We used to produce 300,000 tons of sugar. We can't produce 60,000 tons this year. They're struggling to produce 30,000 tons. The sugar goes into making rum. The sugar is our history. The sugar is our communities, and so on. So we have a problem where the sugar industry is in a huge crisis. Rice isn't doing too badly. Things like bauxite and gold, I would suggest they are driven largely by the external demand, what's happening in the external world. But things like timber, you think about the industries that we have, that we have depended on even our culture as a whole, all right, seems not to be thriving as much as we would like it to. So where is this 9-10% growth, non-oil growth coming from? It's coming from the service sectors. It's construction. It's those sectors that are themselves driven by the oil sector. So even though they're not denoted as part of the oil sector, they are driven by the oil sector. If oil goes into trouble, they go into trouble. So I think that we should be, as a country, we should be duly concerned about the lack of or the threat to diversification, a diversified economy. I mean, we would want, especially in terms of a growing commercial sector, commercial activity, in terms of just the things that people want to do in the country. We want to see a more diversified, more attention to the maintenance of that diversification. So that is the concern about
Dutch disease.
and I think it is connected to our whole governance situation, whether or not our governance really is responding to the specifics of our situation or being driven by other forces.
Dr. Thomas, the two of you there are extensively trained in economics. I am going to take a back seat because I'm trained in philosophy. So this is Leonard Craig show.
So based on what you've said, isn't it too early to pronounce on the trajectory of the economy with respect to falling prey to the Dutch disease? For example, you mentioned sugar. Sugar didn't need oil to kill it. Sugar didn't need oil to have us struggling. So it is a industry that was taking more than it was producing. And I believe it was a political philosophy that kept it going, in that so many people depend on it for their daily sustenance. So we plow some money in it and keep it up and prop it up for as long as we can. So outside of sugar, I would want to agree with you on the question of agriculture, hard agriculture, mainstream agriculture, I should say, with our dairy products and that. Beyond that, I'm not sure if Guyana local situation is capable of sustaining other sectors without dependency on oil. By the nature of the sectors that we have, we don't have such a strong manufacturing sector. We now have to build it. And inevitably, for the first few years, it got to depend on oil to fuel it, right? But as you said, the governance thing.
Sorry.
So what are a couple of recommendations that you would have in mind that we can use to keep the Dutch disease at bay?
Yeah. Well, I take your point about the early stage, so to speak. Although we've been in this for, first of all, the discovery of oil is nearly 10 years ago.
Okay.
And we had immediately concerns about Dutch disease, and we got talking and thinking about it. So when it's too soon, it's always a problem. But I tell you, what's my concern with that is concerned. Right now, we have a government because of the oil, with unprecedented amount of resources. Mm-hmm. And the danger with that, and this is connected to the more like the whole resource curse issue. The danger with that is this, that we don't have the urgency to deal with a problem when it arises. In other words, if you are operating at a point where you're at the margin, you don't have, lots of resources, and a problem arises, you have to deal with it. All right. It's like, for example, if you have serious debts and deficits, and your debt is rising, and you look like you're going over the edge, there's pressure to deal with it. Not so when you have a lot of cash. And so that is the problem with your question about too soon or too late. What's happening is, because there's this extra sense of money to burn, so to speak, that's what we do with it. This happened to us before. In the 1970s, between 74 and 76, Guyana experienced a largest in terms of resources due to the commodity prices. Mm-hmm. And what we did, one of the things we did was decide to make education free education. And we did some other things. And at the same time, we nationalized a set of industries. Maybe partly because, well, for one thing, we wanted to do some things, education and so on, but partly because of the sense that we have a lot of money. So I put it to you that is the concern that we have to be careful about. When we have a problem, if there is a danger of disease, or if we find our sectors declining and so on, we need to address them. And one of the things, you made another interesting observation. We didn't need oil to prosper as a country. Without the oil, we were one of the poorest countries in the hemisphere. There's no reason, given our resources and so on, why this country, in other words, you're saying we need the oil to boost the other sectors. Well, we didn't need to get them going.
To the level that an oil economy should sustain in non-oil sectors.
No. But let me, I have here some excerpts from an interesting paper by my friend Mike DaCosta, who he's a retired IMF official. He used to work at the Bank of Guyana.
He's a Guyanese.
Yes, right. But he's retired from the IMF, and he's done a paper on the institutions, the importance of institutions in the society, and he's done a comparison between Barbados and Guyana. Very interesting. As a matter of fact, this
a published paper.
The paper is coming out in a book that's being published. It should come out by the end of the year. It's being published by the Department of Economics at UG. All right, it's going to come out. It's a very interesting book. I'm sure you're going to have.
It's an edited book.
It's being edited by myself, Taron Kemraj, and Dr. Diana Glasgow de Silva.
It's purely economics, or
no, it's yeah. But I think you're going to find it an interesting thing. But he makes the observation in looking at Barbados and Guyana that at the time of independence, Guyana and Barbados were pretty much on the same level in terms of most things. The average income, etc. The level of education of the population and so on. Guyana, so, you end up with the question, well, why did Barbados move to the level where it reached and we didn't?
But that's because of the era of the 70s.
here's what he has to say. I'll just see if I can find it among my pieces. He says, for example, sustained social progress. The name of the article is Colonial Origins, Institutions and Socioeconomic Progress in the Caribbean, Guyana, and Barbados. And, this is just from the abstract. He says, sustained social progress has been hampered by weak institutions, particularly related to political stability. And later on, he says, unless Guyana addresses its fundamental institutional shortcomings, oil production will reflect in unprecedented rates of growth of GDP and average incomes, but will not deliver political stability nor the sustained improvement in citizens' well-being. And it's a very interesting article. You can look forward to it when it comes out. But for example, he has, at the end of the colonial period, he has these comparisons. And in a sense, what the difference between Barbados, say, and Guyana, one thing is Barbados had a sustained 300 years of British colonialism, and very early.
But Dr. Thomas, you still haven't answered the question.
Which is?
What is your recommendations for avoiding
Well, I'm coming to that.
You are a top class.
No. I'm coming to that. I mean, the thing about it is that I'm just showing you. I'm answering the question about why about the suggestion that we need this boost from oil. I don't think so. The oil.
We don't need this boost from oil.
No, we don't need it. The thing about let me finish. I'm saying that the evidence is, in other words, it is good that we have it. It's an opportunity. But to say that Guyana, with all its resources and endowments, couldn't do better without oil, I wouldn't. I wouldn't agree with that. You see, and that is where.
But he explained that the lack of manufacturing, the lack of industrialization.
Yes, but you have to have
post-colonial period.
Yeah, but you have to.
Where are we going to have this takeoff?
No.
Why we didn't have this takeoff?
Right, you have to. That's the point. The reason for that, and as I said, if the paper is going to come out, but even think about it. So a lot of it is the turbulence that we've had, the political turbulence and so on. The fact of the matter, for example, is throughout the Caribbean, you have a lot of businesses that were started by Guyanese who fled in the 60s and the 70s. All right. So the point is that Guyana, certainly the oil industry is welcome, is a bonanza. But two things I would say. One is, without oil, we should have been doing better. One. And two, having oil doesn't guarantee, and this is the point that Mike makes, having the oil industry does not guarantee that we're going to get there.
In his defense, though, not that he needs to be defended, I think he is arguing from an institutional perspective that regardless of how strong or weak your dollar is, if you have strong institutions, including political institutions, development can easier rest on that as a platform to take off. Because if we are always under threat of a political situation exploding at any time because our institutional mechanisms are not aligned, then that can affect how far our economics can go. At least that is what I gather from.
No, I mean, it's more than that. I mean, look around the world. Why is Singapore, a rich country and we're not? We were starting around the same place in the 1960s.
But we have oil now.
Yes. But you don't forget what I'm saying. Yeah? I'm saying that we should not have been in the hole we were in before the oil. And two, very importantly, look.
But
We've had this. Listen, we've had oil for 4 years of production. You move around Georgetown, you've seen a lot of construction. But, you know, the Starbuck News has been carrying this series talking to people about their cost of living and, you know, how it's affecting them. And I tell you, I moving around Georgetown, do you see the impact of billions of dollars of oil production on people's lives? And is there anything to tell you that where we're going 10 years from now, all of these people's lives will be better?
I will answer that, but I give because I give but I think we are not seeing it the way we want to see it. We're not seeing the medical service, the educational, the employment. You can't find a carpenter, but I will come back to that. Let the economist take over.
Okay. What I don't think you're factoring in, though, in your argument is that the Caribbean, and especially Guyana, had a different geopolitical meaning to the powers that be than Singapore and then even Barbados. We were more in a strategic position. Our leadership was seen as more capable of either establishing or destroying one of the dominant political, international political ideology in the region. And as a result of that, there were many interventions that could have prevented Guyana from moving forward geopolitically, right? And I don't think we should ignore that in our comparisons with Singapore or Barbados or, you know.
No, I agree with you. I mean, but in a way, you are making my argument. You know, Singapore went through a civil war. You know, the whole Malaysia. I mean,
the Chinese Malaysia.
You know, I mean, these countries have had their struggles. The important thing is that how they address the struggles. Guyana. And this is a point that I've made in my book, and Mike DeCosta makes it the same point. Barbados went into and Jamaica and so on into independence in a fairly smooth operation. We went into independence in the middle of the most turbulent time political history.
Exactly.
Right? A very, very turbulent period, and we have never addressed that turbulence. We have never, you know, and this is why the key is institutional reform. We have to fix that. We have not fixed it in 60 years. And that's why we are now having the same arguments and politically, at the political level, as 60 years ago. And so that is the you know, we went into the turb, and then of course your point, the way we dealt with the kind of Cold War environment was a little different from the rest of the Caribbean. Yeah. All right, we took a much more strident position with respect to non-alignment, and we had relations with Cuba and so on, and so on. Yeah,
and for example, Dr. Jagan, for example, was seen as another Castro, for example,
as a threat, yeah,
and was actually removed from government based on CIA papers that came out later that the geopolitical institution had their hand in Guyana. So which Barbados did not have, for example. So I think that link should be made in that article.
Yeah, but you see, basically,
No, but the level of destruction in Guyana from 60 to 64, that didn't happen in Singapore. It was a devastation of the social structure in Guyana.
And it may not
exacerbated racial
and it may not all be of our own doing. They were international hands in the cookie jar.
Lee Kuan Yew, the father of Singapore, didn't have to deal with those problems. But
no, I'm not so sure about that. Singapore did have ethnic
not of the 60s, from 60 to 64 in Guyana. Everything went down.
Okay, but no, look.
We are agreeing. The capital was burnt.
Freddie, we are agreeing. The point is, there was huge turbulence, and the important point is this: that our political environment has not. One of the other points is this: our problems are institutional. I think that there's all this emphasis on ethnic problems, but I live here, I've lived in other places. I think that we have enough congeniality among our people that we have the basis for some kind of dialogue, some kind of conversation about where to go. It's no use carrying on about.
You think so?
Yes.
Politics are adversarial.
Yes, that's it. That's it. It's the politics. It's the politics that's a problem, and that's why you see electoral and constitutional. Look, the electoral system we have supports the bad politics. It's consistent with, but it's not consistent with where we want to go as people.
All right. We are drifting into the political realm. So before I ask you any questions on that, can you kindly tell our viewers what is the motivation for the group that you have formed, the electoral group, and tell us a little about what it seems like a transition somewhat from your professional life as an economist into something this arena. Just explain.
Yeah, sure. First of all, I mean, I'm a co-founder of the electoral reform group. It was formed with some other people, and my motivation is the same motivation for the book. Basically, I looked at the economy, the country I'm in, and I'm saying Guyana in 2018 was the only country with a lower per capita income in the hemisphere than Guyana was Haiti. As a matter of fact, in many respects, Guyana, our company was Haiti. Why, with all of our resources, should a country like ours be in that position?
But we didn't answer that just.
So this is my answer was institutions. It can be resources. We had intellectual people, we had business people, fairly good education, etc. We had problems with the institutions, and the institutions are connected to the whole political environment, right? And therefore, it just seems to me, as an economist, that there has to be a focus on fixing the institutions. Institutions, Mike DeCosta is an economist too, but he recognizes that you don't separate institutions from economics. It's part of the whole same thing.
You still, as time going, you still haven't answered.
Yes.
Leonard, quick question. We're nearing the Dutch disease. How we shift away and avoid it?
Right.
What are your recommendations?
Well,
and you keep, if we were to count how many times you talk about need to fix institution, it'd be quite a number of times. So tell answer correct question and then tell us how you fix institutions. Don't forget our viewers need to know you're a long-standing practitioner of economics.
Yeah, but
you advise the government.
Right.
You headed the Caribbean section of IDB. You wrote books. You should be able to answer.
No, but listen, I am answering. I'm answering.
Start with Craig.
I'm answering the question. I mean, if you want,
you're asking one again as leading economist.
If you
how
ask,
do we avoid the Dutch disease?
No, and my answer is the start. Nothing we can do can guarantee the future, but the start is we need to fix our political, our governance system. You know, if we can fix that, it's a start. Right now, as Mike DaCosta says, it's very clear. I mean, you saw what I said. I don't have to say it again. Basically, without
but we have to read the whole paper to see if he's on the right track.
Yeah, of course. It's going to come out. But without fixing our institutions, we will get these astronomical GDP growth rates, but we will have this online instability. And you know, the way the instability shows itself up. Where does a government get its legitimacy? I think we have a fundamental problem of legitimacy of our governments in a kind of way. All of them.
It's a sweeping statement.
Yes.
Let's discuss.
I wanted to zero in on something because we keep using the term over and over, and there are lots of simple viewers who really want to get something from this. When we talk about institutions, what aspects are you referring to that needs to be fixed? And tell us about one main or two ones that you will fix in the short term, in the long term, whatever.
Good. Okay.
So what is wrong with them that they need to be fixed?
Well, if you don't think that, I mean, the repeated IMF, World Bank reports and so on, they always have a comment on the weakness of our governance and institutions. Because so in other words, for example, I believe that if we have a problem in terms of how we govern ourselves, and as a result of that, you don't get the best results because you don't have a situation where the country we are all pulling in the same direction. You don't have to be in the same party to pull in the same direction as a country. And so our politicians are spending all of their time in this tangled with each other rather than the focus on getting our institutions working. And as a result, that one of the things that's absent, we don't have a situation where the representativeness is, in other words, who represents you in Parliament? Who represents me in Parliament? Who can I appeal to get things done, or to express my interests? That
you have an opposition party of 31 members of Parliament
and the government.
Yeah, and the
right. Yeah. But the point is, who would you if you have an issue? I mean, the Parliament itself, I think, is almost farcical, because you have a government that, in most places, you would have a government that you have checks and balances, right? Right now in Guyana, the government controls the legislature. The government, the kind of control that you have no checks and balances. And as a result of that, what passes as a debate in Parliament is there's no debate.
So
There's no.
What, in your mind, what is the architecture of our political system that can fix or partially fix or substantially fix this issue?
I tell you this. I have my own views about some things that need to be.
But tell us.
No. I mean, like, for example, I've mentioned, the way our elections work, where we have, we have proportional representation, but there are lots of things that we can do to make the proportional representation more proportional. One thing is we have closed constituencies, closed lists. We can make the list open so that, for example, I wouldn't be voting just for a party list. I would vote for Mr. X on the list, which would then force Mr. X to be more responsive to my needs as a in the community. But there are many changes. The point about this book is to show that there are options. And I'm getting from you, and I get this from a lot of people, it's almost as if we are in a desperate situation, but we can't help it. This is how it's supposed to be.
I wouldn't suggest that we can't help it, because I myself have feelings and that our system needs some amount of revamping. Right?
Yeah. Okay. So,
if it were up to me, a lot of things would be radically revamped.
Right. Okay. Well, this is
you don't run a country by radically revamping its entire political architecture. That in itself would be a recipe for disaster.
Why?
Because we have been doing many of the things we do in our current constitution since 1980, and some of the similar things prior to that. And you can't just revamp an entire system and put people into a situation where it is a complete new and changed thing. To me, we have to have progressive steps. So we can change the power of the presidency, and we have a target that over a number period. For example, you had a suggestion. Not that I agree fully with that suggestion, but you include a concept of an open list. And those are incremental things, right? But to me, a radical change is just as dangerous as, right? Because many changes can weaken certain aspects of a political party's operation and machinery. And no party wants that, or no party wants to wake up overnight and find themselves in a disadvantage. Or to lose some of the advantage that they have today. So while I hear what you're saying, we got to marry it with that understanding of politics and how politicians
think. I agree. You and I understand exactly what you're saying, and as a result of that, I'll make two opening points. One is, if Guyanese people were to sit down and go and come up with a different, some kind of reformed governance model, it would be it doesn't have to be radical, but it would be the most revolutionary thing we have done since independence. Maybe from before.
But what is this?
No. That's the first point. Right. But the second point I want to make is connected to what you just said. I may have my views. A political reform, there's no perfect system. The system you end up with has to be negotiated, right? Because we have to decide, I can live with this, you could live with that, it's a thing. And that's why you're asking me for suggestions about
Two
reforms.
processes we ask you for.
No, hold on.
Suggestion to avoid disease.
No, but hold on. Okay, I'm saying to you that what we have to do is get to the negotiation about it. I have my views. I have suggestions. You may have to be all.
You
have something.
You're the guest. The viewers want to hear.
Yeah. No, but let me tell you some things about our electoral system. First of all, we have an electoral system that is polarized and polarizing.
The society is polarized, or the electoral system is polarized?
The political system is polarized. I don't think we have a polarized society.
You don't?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I get, I don't live in a polarized society. I think that because, people are different and differences are real, so, differences don't mean we're polarized. But hold on. I think that we have a polarized political system. We have a multifaceted society. That political system does not fit the society we're in. We have a situation, for example, where the government, with one seat advantage, holds all the cards. They reform the constitution, the Representation of the People Act. Look what happened yesterday. Some decision to be made that GECOM is a total mess. GECOM makes an appointment on the basis that 3 people plus the chair voted, 3 vote against. That happens every single time.
So you want consensus in the running of a society? Idealistic?
No, it's not. It's not. In other words, listen, it's not that...
So you saw something wrong with an appointment made in GECOM with majority voted?
No,
it happens all...
no, but I'm just saying to you that basically, in most electoral management bodies, the bodies operate on the basis of consensus. And the bodies operate in an apolitical way. They're set up to do that. GECOM is low-hanging fruit where reform is concerned, because GECOM is absolutely
politicized.
It's just wrong. You know how you set up I usually make a very good example of. We could look around the Caribbean and see how electoral management bodies work. Okay, and you look at the Jamaican example, for example.
But Guyana had similar laws. You see, sometimes we cannot judge these things in vacuum.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. I'm not judging things in vacuum.
Guyana had similar laws as the other Caribbean islands,
right?
With respect to the election commission.
Yeah.
And that formula did not work. It delivered several elections that people in and out of Guyana to this day claim were rigged.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And it was the same formula. With some, Trinidad and Jamaica and so on have some improvements since, because we're talking since the 70s, whenever. But it was the same, almost a photocopy of the same law. You pick them up, you pick up each one of them, they practically have the same words, except Guyana is substituted for Trinidad and so on and so on. But it did not deliver elections that the people of Guyana, as well as external bodies, had confidence in. And both political parties recognize that. And as a safeguard, this system that we have now was implemented. It was good for when it was, and I might agree with you that it is start losing its relevance, but it is not entirely irrelevant.
Well, the point about it is, you have the history.
Yeah. But before you continue, let me just make this one quick observation. If you ask the top political parties in Guyana, the ones in parliament and whichever other political party now showing any form of growth or whatever, you ask them if they want any changes in GECOM, and they will tell you no.
Yeah, of course.
But before he comes in, GECOM held an election in 2006. There was a winner. GECOM held an election in 2011. There was a minority government. GECOM held an election in 2015. The government changed. Right? GECOM held an election in 2020. It was certified by the international observers around the world. How is GECOM at fault there? It pulled off some good elections in which government changed hands?
Yeah. I mean, the fact that it worked at one point doesn't mean that it's perfect for now. The thing about it is that right now we have a situation where, as I said, the formula isn't right. If you look around the world, you look at India, for example, where the election commission is 3 people. 3 people for 700 million voters. And the way in which they are elected, the way in which the formula is to do 2 things. To get people who will operate in a non-partisan way. You don't have to be somebody without a partisan preference to operate in a non-partisan way. But so you get that situation. And 2, they are protected from political interference. For example, in the case of India, you're only elected or appointed by the president, not the prime minister, appointed for 7 years, 1 term, in and out. So you can't be in a situation where you are looking forward to your next term.
Yeah, but
right. So no, what I'm saying is this. And you see, it bothers me a little bit that we are in these kind of situations, and so much of the population seems to think that this is the best we can do. It's not. And if you look around the world,
the elites decide that.
Exactly. That's exactly the point.
No, yeah, the elites in this country are letting the people down.
The elites in the country believe they know best,
and they
ignore a country.
No,
they're
looking after their own. They're looking after. They're looking for themselves. They're looking after for themselves. They're not really, Anyway, I don't want to get in an argument about the elites, but the point about it is this: that there are rules about how you set up an electoral management board. And I think
I can't help getting in this thing before Craig come. We have had long periods of democracy, while Singapore had long periods of autocracy and dictatorship. But anyway, Craig.
Yeah. Hear what I hear you on GECOM.
See, you really think that GECOM is a perfect?
I think it needs to be. I think it needs to be changed. I don't think political parties should send representatives to
GECOM. But however, because
it still has functionalism.
Exactly, but because of the institutional problems that you pointed out, GECOM will become polarized if this formula change under the current institution. You just mentioned that a government with 1 seat majority controls the highs and lows of the country and the economy and all of that. They might even be able to control how judges are appointed.
So,
and what will stop them from controlling how every person on GECOM is appointed?
That is
why this system that we have now is a safeguard. We got to change a lot of other things. I mean, you mentioned that GECOM is a low-hanging fruit. I don't believe it is. under the current situation, because the politicians that exist on both sides are not going to create or cause any laws to be passed that puts them in a disadvantage. And no political party wants to go in to an electoral system at a disadvantage. And the minute you reform, the party with the one seat are going to put all the provisions in the law to protect themselves. And to give themselves power to appoint.
Yes.
Unless you're saying America should roll in with guns and say this is the system you should use, and you dare not. Other than that, because the society is polarized, GECOM will then become polarized. So the best formula as it is now is this formula that we have. We got to change a lot of things incrementally and then go to GECOM. So I don't agree it's a low-hanging fruit. It's a higher fruit than many other things. There are many other things that are lower, in my opinion.
I like that one though. GECOM is a low-hanging fruit.
No, it is, because I can go back to that. But what you just said, what you just laid out, is almost depressing. It's almost depressing.
I understand.
Because you're basically saying that the political people would not support this, and therefore it doesn't have a hope and a chance. And I hear that all the time. And that is why it is so important for us to have these kind of conversations. So first of all, we have to understand that we can do better. I think I must have said this in the first page of this book, basically, where I say that the problems we have is this sense of resignation. Because when I came back to Guyana in 2014, one thing I had to get accustomed to was people saying to me, "This is Guyana." So basically what you're saying is that, the powers that be, the political people that will not support this thing, and therefore it's not going to happen. And my thing is, quite the contrary, because
I take your point.
We have to have this conversation.
If it's flawed, it needs to be fixed.
Not only that, but it's important for us to expose, to discuss. We have to support the people who are opening the voice. And, all around the world, people, by the force of their voices, have been able to change things, even if the politicians don't want to change.
The thing we have in Guyana here is that when people do not hold power, right, they have all the ideas about what to change, what they wouldn't change, and all of that. Let's start with the PPP.
The problem is that when they get in the power,
exactly
right.
Let's start with the PPP, for example. The PPP rallied against the 1980 Constitution. And one would think that when you took power in 92, you should overhaul that Constitution because you said that was a rigged, the referendum.
1978.
It was rigged. And by thing, you had a rigged Constitution. You got into power in 92. You supposed to dismantle the Constitution, right? But they sat there and Dr. Jagan said, "I am not a dictator. Do you think I'm a dictator? Would I run this country dictatorially?" And he ran the country on the individual and not on the institution. I'm a good man and I run it a good way, right? Without taking advantage of the excesses baked into the Constitution. So it didn't change. UPNU AFC came later. And they ran mainly, myself and Freddie, went around this country and campaign and talk about changing the Constitution. And when they got into power, Nothing. Not even.
I was here then.
The AFC commissioned Nigel Hughes to be the person to set up the framework upon which the constitutional reform process would start. And he did a preliminary report on the process to be followed, whatever, and the president just took it and rubbished it. So we had several opportunities along the way to overhaul the constitution.
No, but I would go even a little further. You know, right now, the government is rolling out a very impressive program. The money here, what they're gonna do, the building. You know, how many hostels they're gonna build, how many schools, and so on, so on. All these plans. The one thing they don't touch is institutional reform. You know, you listen to Irfan Ali.
They've had institutional reform. The Representation of the People Act, no?
Hold on. I'm
being fair. The constitution was changed.
No.
The constitution was changed
several times. I'm not saying that it wasn't changed.
The opposition now have to agree to judicial appointments.
That's nothing new.
No, that
was changed.
But that was changed.
Yeah, of course.
The opposition has to agree to the confirmation of the head of the.
No, but here, I get that. What I'm saying is within the last week or two, maybe as a pre-election, whatever, the government has been really rolling out its program. And the thing that's missing from the program, and I mean, I go back to the point made by my friend here. The thing is that, the thing that's missing is they're just focusing on, they just completely ignore the need for the institutional change. You know, and let me say this. It's not working.
Dr. Thomas, the operators in my ear saying be 2 minutes over time. Just quickly, please.
Well, listen,
we gotta go.
You know, well, I'll tell you this. What this whole discussion there is about is really about the will to promote. We have to promote institutional reform. Those of us who are outside of the political arena, we have to promote electoral and constitutional reform because that is the only way. Okay. And I'm disturbed, for example, the university. I've been trying to get the university involved. And the Faculty of Social Sciences cannot find two people, and the law department cannot find two people to come on a panel and discuss the constitutional reform.
No, we gotta go.
Right? And I'll tell you this, Freddie. You were once in trouble with the university, and students came out and picked it. That would not happen now. Because the people who are in charge of the university are there to... So there's suppression.
The operator say you're exploiting them.
There's suppression at many levels, and we have to fight.
We gotta go. This gentleman and I watched UG together. He was, I don't know if I was senior to him or he was senior to me, but we gotta go.
You're senior to me all the time.
Thanks for being with us. Our guest was the author of this book, one of Guyana's longest-standing practitioner of economics in the Caribbean, Dr. Desmond Thomas. His book, Electoral System, Reform for a Diverse Nation. He was a former advisor to President Burnham. He was the head of the Department of the Caribbean at the Inter-American Development Bank, and he's currently
retired.
And he's currently founding member of a civil society group, Election Reform Group. Thanks for being with us. We will see you on Wednesday. Catch you later. Bye-bye.